Clairvoyance and Occult Powers by Swami Panchadasi. That is William Walker Atkinson. Lesson 14 was Astral Body Traveling. This is now Lesson 15. Strange Astral Phenomena. There are several phases of astral phenomena other than those mentioned in the preceding chapters, which it will be better for the student to become acquainted with in order to round out his general knowledge of the subject, although the manifestations are comparatively rare and not so generally recognized in works on this subject. One of the first of these several phases of astral phenomena is that which may be called thought form projection. This manifestation comes into place on the psychic scale just between ordinary clairvoyance on the one hand and astral body projection on the other. It has some of the characteristics of each and is often mistaken for one or the other of these phases. To understand this phenomena, the student should know something regarding the fact that thought frequently takes on astral form. I have spoken of these in some of the preceding lessons. The ordinary thought form is quite simple as a rule, and it does not bear any particular resemblance to the sender thereof. But in some cases, a person may, consciously or unconsciously, strongly and clearly think of himself as present at some other place, and thus actually create a thought form of himself at that place, which may be discerned by those having clairvoyant vision. Moreover, this thought form of himself is connected psychically with himself and affords a channel of psychic information for him. As a rule, these thought forms are only projected by those who have trained their minds and will along occult lines. But occasionally, under the stress of strong emotion or desire, an ordinary person may focus his psychic power to such an extent that the phenomena is manifested. Excuse me. Now, here I will quote from an English investigator of astral phenomena who has had much experience on that plane. Now, he says, all students are aware that thought takes form, at any rate upon its own plane, and in the majority of cases upon the astral plane as well. But it may not be so generally known that if a man thinks strongly of himself as present at any given place, the form assumed by that particular thought will be a likeness of the thinker himself, which will appear at the place in question. Essentially, this form must be composed of the matter of the mental plane, but in very many cases it would draw around itself matter of the astral plane also, and so would approach much nearer to visibility. There are, in fact, many instances in which it has been seen by the person thought of, most notably by means of the unconscious influence emanating from the original thinker. None of the consciousness of the thinker would, however, be included within this thought form. When once sent out from him, it would normally be a quite separate entity, not indeed absolutely unconnected with its maker, but practically so far as the possibility of receiving any impression through it is concerned. But practically so, as far as the possibility of receiving any impression through it is concerned. Excuse me. Not absolutely unconnected with his maker, but only practically so, just as far as the possibility of receiving any impression through it is concerned. Okay. This type of, continuing to quote, this type of clairvoyance consists then in the power to retain so much connection with and so much hold over a newly created thought form as will render it possible to receive impressions by means of it. Such impressions as were made upon the form would in this case be transmitted to the thinker, not along an astral telegraph line, but by a sympathetic vibration. In a Perfect case of this kind of clairvoyance, it is almost as though the seer projected a part of his consciousness into the thought form. Almost. And used it as a kind of outpost from which observation was possible. He sees almost as well as he would if he himself stood in the place of his thought form. The figures at which he is looking will appear to him as of life size and close at hand, instead of tiny and at a distance, as in the case of some other forms of clairvoyance. And he will find it possible to shift his point of view if he wishes to do so. Clairaudience is perhaps less frequently associated with this type of clairvoyance than with the others, but this place is to some extent taken by a kind of mental perception of the thoughts and intentions of those who are seen. Continuing the quote again, since the man's consciousness is still in the physical body, he will be able, even when exercising this faculty, to hear and to speak, and so far as he can do this without any distraction of his attention. The moment that the intentness of his thought fails, the whole vision is then gone, and he will have to construct a fresh thought form before he can resume it. Instances in which this kind of sight is possessed with any degree of perfection by untrained people are naturally rarer than in the other types of clairvoyance because the capacity for mental control required and the generally finer nature of the forces employed. End of quote. Now, I may mention that this particular excuse me, sorry about that. I may mention that this particular method is frequently employed by advanced occultists of all countries, being preferred for various reasons. Some of the reasons of this preference are as follows. A, the ability to shift the vision and to turn around almost as well as in the case of an actual astral body projection. This gives quite an advantage to this method over the method of ordinary clairvoyance. B, it does away with certain disadvantages of going out into the astral, in the astral body, which only trained occultists realize. It gives almost the same results as astral body clairvoyance without a number of the disadvantages and inconveniences. Now, in India, especially, this form of clairvoyance is comparatively frequent. This by reason of the fact that the Hindus, as a race, are far more psychic than those of the Western lands. All else considered, and besides, there are a much greater number of highly developed occultists there than in the West. Moreover, there is a certain psychic atmosphere surrounding India, by reason of its thousands of years of deep interest in things psychic and spiritual, all of which renders the production of psychic phenomena far easier than in other lands. In India, moreover, we find many instances of another form of psychic or astral phenomena, and I alluded to the production of thought-form pictures, which are plainly visible to one or more persons. I'm going to cut this video off right here because I just need a break. So I'll make this a, let's say, lesson 15 part A. Then there will be a part B. There might even be a C. Who knows? Anyway, stay tuned for lesson 15, part 2 or part B.